Are you ready? Awesome. Well, don't blink and make sure you don't take notes because this is going to go really fast. I'm going to talk about 3 sets of things. I'm going to talk about my journey from experiences to impacts. I'm going to talk about some of my experiments at Penn State, where we worked with over 150 faculty members to integrate engagement and entrepreneurship into the fabric of the university. And finally, I'm going to talk about impact-focused careers. So, experiences to impacts. So, I've been at Penn State for about 15 and a half years, and I spent about 13 of those years building up an academic program in humanitarian engineering and social entrepreneurship. So, we design new technologies for developing countries and work with a wide array of partners to commercialize these technologies. The goal is not to make money. The goal is to make a lot of money, because that's how you can scale impact, reach more people, and have that technology product fulfill its destiny. So for us, when we talk about sustainable and scalable solutions, it means 4 things. It means we want a solution to be technologically appropriate, environmentally benign, culturally acceptable, and economically sustainable. And all 4 aspects are just as important. We do this through a series of 5 courses. So we have a course on social entrepreneurship that focuses on designing business and implementation strategies for technology ventures in developing countries. We have a seminar on design for developing communities. We have a project-based course in humanitarian engineering. We have a fieldwork course. And finally, we have a course on reflection and research dissemination with 3 themes of ethical decision-making, grassroots diplomacy, and research dissemination, because all students in the program are expected to work on original publishable research that strengthens their ventures, that ensures that we have an evidence-based and a data-driven approach. So who is in these classes? We have freshmen through 4th-year PhD students. It's open to everybody. Half the students are engineering students, the other have come from every single college across campus. About half the students have consistently been women. And practically almost every single venture, the leaders are often women. We've studied their motivations really well, and the reason they do it is not because they want to help people. That's the number 2 reason. The reason they are in my program is because they want to become global professionals, and this is what they want to do for life. All our classes have a flipped classroom pedagogy, and at the end of the day, we have 3 goals: impact, impact, and impact. So in the classes, when they're working on these technologies, working on the business strategies, they're in the classroom, in the lab, in the field, they can do the work themselves, they can get their boyfriends or girlfriends to do it, they can get their grandmother to do it. We don't care, as long as stuff gets done. We work in 2 arenas. Over the years, we worked in food security and global health. One of our flagship ventures, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this to give some examples, is around low-cost greenhouses that have a return on investment of 2 to 3 crop cycles. And we have about 320 of these across 20-some countries in Africa, and it's growing very quickly. We're working on a mushroom production system in Cambodia that is funded by the State Department. In Kenya, over the last 5 years, we've built up a social enterprise that is now self-sustaining, that has provided paid services to over 400,000 customers. We're working on a wide array of diagnostic devices, like these are test strips to screen people for diabetes and to screen women for urinary tract infections. Our innovation is the way we manufacture these, which is by taking a foam stamp, dipping it in this chemical, and stamping it on a piece of paper. So you can make these test strips for about 2 cents each, and the capital you need to get going is less than $10. And that's how you can get this business up and running very quickly. The reason we do this is not the health impacts. That's our second reason. The number 1 reason we do this is because we have a network of over 1,000 community health workers, and this is a way for them to make a little more money while getting the test strips to the women who can do these tests in the comfort and privacy of their homes. We just found out yesterday morning that we won a Grand Challenges Award for $100,000 to do our next round of field trials. This proposal in its entirety was written by juniors at Penn State. So we design with communities, but we commercialize for markets. And we publish about 25 to 30 articles on an annual basis. The vast majority of these articles have undergraduate students as the lead authors, and they are not allowed to publish in undergraduate journals. They have to go after the regular faculty and practitioner journals and play with the big boys and girls. So that's what we do. Here are 4 things that I want you to think about. The first is that we don't think about problems, we think about opportunities. There are lots of problems in the world. Some are solvable, some are not. 1 billion people in the world live in places that are considered food insecure. Not a single organization is never going to be able to challenge, or going to be able to address that challenge. We keep track of it. We know that we are in the right arena, but what we think about are opportunities. So these are greenhouses that cost about $3,000 in East Africa. By the time they reach West Africa, they cost $8,000 to $10,000. The vast majority of the people cannot afford these greenhouses. So in 2010, we set out to build greenhouses with a very specific goal. A greenhouse that can be put together by 2 people in 2 days for less than $200. And we accomplished that. And we tested these greenhouses in Kenya, in Tanzania, and Rwanda, in places with different climatic conditions, in places with different supply chain scenarios. And then we launched a series of enterprises called Grow Greenhouses. These greenhouses, they look like that. This one is in Mozambique. It costs less than $1,000. It pays for itself in about 9 months. It supports year-round growth instead of 1 or 2 crop cycles. Farmers can have 4 or even 5 crop cycles, and they make thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars more. And most importantly, it reduces water consumption by more than 60%. So our innovation here, it's a very simple design, but the innovation is in the process. So day 1, we start with a piece of land that looks like that. At the end of the first day, we have the structure built. At the end of the second day, we have the entire greenhouse completed, leaving a few hours to conduct training to help farmers transition from open-air farming to greenhouse farming. So it's all about that process. And our metaphor for this was a Formula One tire change. If you can do a Formula One tire change in 45 seconds, can you put together a really simple structure that gets the job done, that delivers impact in 2 days? And it's worked really well for us over years. So it's all about those opportunities. The question is never what the problem is. There are lots of problems in the world. You go to a community in a low-resource setting and they have the same problems with energy. They want jobs, healthcare, energy, you name it. It's exactly the same list of challenges. The question is not what the problem is. The question is, what is the problem for which you can design and actually deliver a sustainable solution? And that's the one that you want to go after. So it's about the opportunities. Second, it's all about the outcomes. It's not about those activities. And this is something that we oftentimes overlook. Let's go back to some fundamentals. You have inputs into a system. You do activities that lead you to outputs and ultimately the outcomes. The number of greenhouses built, the number of people served, the number of people in this room are outputs. The outcome is, how is that transforming the way you teach, the way you multiply your impact? How is it improving livelihoods? How is it improving the quality of life for people that we are working in? It's ultimately about those outcomes that lead to those impacts. Which means that when we are out raising funding for this venture, it's an activity. Our greenhouses in 2 countries are sponsored by USA through a Securing Water for Food program. And so they got 520 proposals, of which they funded 16. 4 of them were American entities. We were one of the ventures they funded, and we made it through year 3 of tranched funding. So it's been a really arduous journey getting there. And again, that proposal was written by juniors at Penn State. And while we are proud of that, we did not really celebrate that. We celebrated the outcomes. It's all about the outcomes. So designing the greenhouse, great job, but that doesn't matter. What matters is the outputs, are the number of greenhouses on the ground, but more importantly, the number of greenhouses that have paid for themselves, because that signifies that they are working and they are getting the job done. They are actually delivering impact. So it's all about those outcomes and the improved quality of life. And to reach those outcomes, you can't just be designing the greenhouse. You have to design the entire ensemble. So we design these greenhouses. We have construction manuals. We have quality control protocols. We have startup guides to help farmers up and running. We have case management systems for agronomic issues. And we have experts now around the world that look at these cases and provide feedback on how to address whatever issue they're having. It's water savings protocols, it's data management systems, which is becoming more and more critical as we expand this venture across so many countries. So you have to design the entire ensemble and not just the product. You have to design the system. And so in terms of the outcomes, these are the outcomes that we strive for, that we measure, and what gets measured gets done. For small farmers, the profits are about 3 times as much. For women's groups, the profits are 5 times. And for commercial farmers, the profits are 10 times or more. We have farmers in Mozambique that are making tens of thousands of dollars more with a $1,200 investment in 2 small greenhouses. So it's all about those outcomes. The third point is that we don't need heroes. We need people who get stuff done. What is your favorite narrative of engaging with the world, of engaging with low-resource settings? Do you want to be the empowerer or employer or collaborator? We like to think about us as being co-creators, and our goal is to co-create solutions. Maybe co-create products, but definitely co-create systems. And the rationale for that is extremely clear. Every entrepreneur, and I know there are many entrepreneurs in the room here, you know that getting a venture up and running, it's not about the idea. Ideas are worthless, right? It's all about the execution. It's all about getting stuff done on the ground. The technology is 5%. How are you going to implement it? Supply chains, incentive structures. That's what takes the most amount of effort. And that journey from point A to point B does not look like that. That journey looks like that. You have to keep pivoting. And this is exactly what we need to start teaching our students. Not coming up with a new idea, not coming up with a new prototype. That's great. That's one slice. That's the first 5%. What about the other 95%? That's exactly what we need to start teaching our students. How to execute, how to get stuff done on the ground. And then we should be patting ourselves on the back. The difference between 99% and 100% is not 1%. The difference between 99% and 100% is 100%. Either something is working on the ground or it is not working on the ground. And that's that perseverance and grit and attitude is what we need to cultivate. It's all about execution. The fourth point, it's about ecosystems. You cannot, if you want these ventures to work, you cannot be just designing products. You have to design entire ecosystems around those products. So what did it mean for our greenhouses? It meant figuring out ways in which our farmers can get economic support, how they can get logistical support to get their produce to market. It's a question of market linkages. Capacity building, conflict resolution, construction and maintenance for the greenhouses, and most importantly, access to capital. Partnerships with microfinance institutions, with local banks that can provide these farmers money to buy these greenhouses and pay back over a 9-month period. So you got to build that entire ecosystem. And while it takes years to build and nurture that ecosystem, it takes very little to get started. But ultimately, that's what our goal should be. So we've done this in Kenya. We have a company there called Mavuno Greenhouses. In Cameroon, in Mozambique and Sierra Leone, funded by USAID. In Cambodia, funded by the State Department. And we're doing this in Senegal, in Cape Verde, in India, and a bunch of other countries. So what started as a project by a couple of sophomores is now in about 25 countries will take away your money and sell you a greenhouse. And that's the journey from experience to impact. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a long-haul game, but that's what we should be striving for. Because skill sets and mindsets don't solve problems. Solutions solve problems. And execution is the challenge. The second area I want to talk about is about systemic change, and this is based on some of the work I did at Penn State, where we had a goal that by 2020, every single Penn State student would have an engaged scholarship experience, where they would be stepping out of the textbook, working in the real world in a tangible, measurable, impactful, meaningful way. And so we designed a bunch of, I led the piloting of a bunch of organizational models to figure out how can we do this at a university with 23 campuses and 130,000 students. And I'm going to share with you what some of these models look like, because I think this is very relevant to integrating entrepreneurship into the fabric. So first of all, my basic philosophy of a university is that of a fractal. So the university has its larger goals of learning, of advancing knowledge, of sharing that knowledge, and helping convert that knowledge into practical, tangible value. And that is for the university, for the college, for the department, for every faculty member, and every student. So I reject this whole idea that I'm a faculty member, you're a staff member, you're a student, you're a grad, undergrad. No, we are all wayfarers on this journey. We are all on our own continuums, and we can all move forward. There are some faculty who've been doing this for 10 years, and some who are just getting started. We are all on our own journeys. And what we take away from an experience is really about where we were on that journey earlier. So with that fundamental construct, or fundamental assumption, bias, prejudice, what have you, let me share with you some stuff we found. So I worked personally one-on-one with over 150 faculty members over a 3-year span. It was insane. And what we found is that how faculty will engage, how they will integrate some sort of an active pedagogy into their classroom depends on 4 sets of criteria. It depends on where they are on their career track, the nature of their appointment, specialization rewards, what resources they have access to, what kind of control they have over their teaching and research, and finally their own interest and preparation. And we brought this down to a flow chart. And this started, I know you can't read it, but I'm very happy to share this with you later. By the way, the way we get those 150 publications out is every single thing I'm talking about has been written about somewhere. So send me a note, I'll be happy to send you this flowchart. But we did this with over 150 faculty members, and believe it or not, it works. What we found is that while reality is a binary, while impact is a binary, something is real or something is not real. There is no in between. You cannot have scaffolding. It's real or it's unreal. That is not true for engagement. Engagement is not a binary. It's not that you're engaged or you're not. You can be engaged in many different ways at many different levels. And we found that faculty, depending on these different criteria, could be engaged in high impact programs, in learning focused programs, in pipeline building activities, and professional development opportunities. And so we said, how do we design these larger ecosystems? So here is one of the pilots we did. We said, here we have a bunch of courses in my program in humanitarian engineering and social entrepreneurship. We are working on these ventures. We have teams that are completely focused on the venture. Their life depends on the venture and its success. That's all that matters. That's the purpose of their life. And then we have a seminar class. We streamed it live, made it available to a whole bunch of people. And then we started, and that was about 50 students involved. And then we started integrating projects into other courses. So we had a biomedical engineering course where for 70% of the grade, they were working on low-cost diagnostic devices that fit into my telemedicine system. We had a chemistry class that was evaluating the lifespan of these test strips to screen people for diabetes, and a whole bunch of projects. And so that was like 70% of the grade. And then we had other classes for 50% of the grade and other for 30% of the grade. We had an astronomy class. So this guy who teaches astronomy came and said, hey, this is awesome. I want to participate. What do I do? And we were lost. We're like, what do you do with an astronomy class? And he said, wait a minute, you are working on these greenhouses. How do you know what is the best way to orient these greenhouses depending on where you are in the world? My students will tell you that. And so this became a project in his class, a freshman level class, and they could see how astronomy can also be very practical. And they gave us a half-page formula that is now part of how we orient greenhouses depending on where we are in the world. So this was a win-win. The students loved it, the faculty loved it, because they were not doing this for a grade anymore. They were doing it because they wanted to be a part of something bigger. They wanted to be a part of our ventures. And this, most importantly, was a pipeline to recruit those students into my program, which, as you might realize, is somewhat insane. But I was looking for those very specific students whom I was not getting. We engaged over 1,300 students across this model. It took us about 8 to 10 hours working with every single faculty member to help them get started. And some of these were just developing new rubrics, changing the way they did projects. And some of these were open heart surgeries where we completely changed the pedagogy of the class. And that would take 15 hours instead of 12. Of the 150 who got started doing this, over 100 of them are still doing all kinds of awesome things. So once you turn on the light bulb, it is forever. So that is one model. Another thing we realized is that there are a lot of classes at Penn State that get canceled. So we said, what if there was a simple doodle-like tool, and if you're sick or you're out at a conference, you fill this thing out, and you can have somebody that comes to your class and does a flipped classroom adventure around creativity, innovation, sustainable development, what have you. So we developed about 21 of these adventures, and we had 5, 6 of these students and staff members who would then go out to classes. We started with a price point of 25 cents per student. And we were trying to design these experiences so that we could deliver them at 25 cents a student. And in one semester, we had about over 80 classes and 2,000 students who now were engaging in all these different activities, getting connected to the career services and a whole bunch of other outcomes. So that's another very simple organizational model. It's a lean, scalable system. Here's another one. We started working with freshmen, like freshman level courses, like a chemistry 100 class, which has 50 sections. And the faculty there said, there is nothing we're going to do with you because we cannot have projects, we cannot have any active pedagogies, we have just so many students. And we said, okay, how about this? What if we give you 30 slides? You have 30 lectures, and every lecture when you talk about something, when you talk about Melton's Law, you are going to show one slide that shows how Melton's Law applies in the real world. And here is a student. Scooby-Doo did an internship at Dow Chemical and applied Melton's Law to do this. And here's opportunity 2 and opportunity 3. And we gave them 30 slides that they integrated into their course. It was easy for them. The students loved it. They loved it. But this is how we got freshmen to know about all these different opportunities that are out there. In the first semester itself, we had 10,000 students who were now learning about opportunities not once, but every single class, and some of them from multiple classes. So it was like immense peer pressure because now they feel like, oh, everybody's doing all this awesome stuff and I'm missing out. And so they started going to the internship offices and the study abroad offices and so on. What did it take us to get this up and running? A series of about 65, 70 slides. That's all it took. It's lean, it's scalable. How do you get students to publish? And how do you get get the job done? Well, we designed a series of 55 learning modules on everything to do with publication, with research writing, navigating conferences, and these were like go-to resources. Our goal was not to make students better writers. If that happens, great. All we want to give them is just-in-time advice on how to get their articles done and into journals and conferences. And Google it up. It's a website open to everybody. It's called the Pub Hub. So these are all kinds of innovations to affect systemic change and move everybody further on their trajectories. And finally, the third thing I'm going to talk about is impact-focused careers. So here's my challenge. I get students, anywhere from 50 to 70 students a year, who are all interested in pursuing careers where they can directly, tangibly see the human impact of their work. And I talk to tens of them every week, and they tell me the same thing. What pays well, I really don't enjoy. And what I really enjoy doing, I don't know who's going to hire me to do it. I want to do HESI for life. What should I do next? And I didn't know how to advise them. So I started talking to social innovators, sustainable development professionals, people who work for the World Health Organizations and various UN agencies, various kinds of nonprofits and foundations, and large corporations focused on sustainable sourcing and corporate social responsibility. I spoke to over 300 people who worked in, about half of them were women. They worked in food security, they worked in global health, they worked in emergency response. And the common thread was that every single one of them believed in the power of science, technology, and innovation to improve the human condition. And then I got together some of my best students ever, and I put together a book called Solving Problems That Matter and Getting Paid for It. Google it up. The PDF of the book is available for free download. So you can access it, you can share it with anybody you want. It's a 2-pound book, so reading the PDF is the easiest way to take it with you. And here's what I found. I found a lot of things, and I'm going to share some of them with you. The way the book is structured, there are 7 parts. There's a part on STEM for social innovation with the opening chapter by Phil Weilerstein from VentureWell, and a whole bunch of really cool people from USAID and the Gates Foundation and elsewhere. A chapter on the various kinds of organization in the social innovation and sustainable development space, a chapter on professional preparation, on professional competencies needed to be successful, on finding your niche and getting a foot in the door, on personal considerations that takes a deep dive into salary and compensation and how it works. And most importantly, it has a series of 100 innovator profiles of all these people doing it. All the expert briefs, 54 of them, are in a listicle format. So here's one by Kathy Leslie, who is the director of Engineers Without Borders, USA. Here's what an innovator profile looks like. So here's Rick Johnston. He works for the World Health Organization. He works in the healthcare space on water and sanitation. He makes a whole lot of money, $140,000, which if you work for the World Health Organizations, you don't pay taxes. So that's cold, hard cash. That's his job description. That's his career trajectory. And that is practical advice from him for the next generation. And there are 100 of these profiles, which are all extremely useful in their own right. So what I found is that STEM professionals You can find them across the board in all kinds of organizations. They play a lot of different roles as entrepreneurs, as grant writers, as strategy consultants, as measurement and evaluation experts. They've worked for many different kinds of organizations. So one of my struggles at Penn State and what I've observed at many universities is that we strictly think about preparing students for industry. No, industry is one of 20 different kinds of organizations. It's important, it's incredibly important, and I'm a hardcore capitalist, don't get me wrong. But you have multilateral organizations, you have various kinds of nonprofits and foundations and think tanks and the education, the higher education system, the K-12 system, and we need scientists and engineers in every single kind of organization, and if you look deeper, you will find them. They work across many different sectors, from energy to health to food security to education to the environment, and increasingly at the nexus of these different sectors. And most importantly, they espouse many different approaches. Some are fond of education and business-based approaches, some prefer the policy approach, and ultimately when they are trying to decide what they want to do, it's not about the organization, it's not about the role, it's about their preferred philosophy of engagement. The system is getting better and better for STEM professionals, and there are 4 trends that are driving this. First, of course, is globalization. Second is the convergence of sectors, as the for-profit and non-profit sector are realizing that there's a huge overlap in their interests. The third is increased role by the private sector, which is an absolute game changer, because that brings with it a focus on more evidence-based approaches, on more repeatability, on scalability, and it opens the door to STEM professionals because they're willing to pay more money. Increased professionalization. This is the ultimate game changer. The traditional thinking was that we are a nonprofit, we need to keep overheads low. So let's hire the cheapest labor we can get and then transfer as much money to our beneficiaries, to the people we are trying to help. The new thinking is that, look, we have scarce resources, these are complex problems, let's find the smartest people, pay them well, and see how they can multiply the resources and get the job done. And that opens the door for STEM professionals, more so than anything else. So here are 5 things, and so most of the people who were, whom I interviewed, they were not hired for their skill sets. They were hired for their mindset. They were hired for their analytical skills, for their problem-solving skills, for a quantitative approach, for an evidence-based approach, a data-driven approach, and a systems approach. So when I said, hey, you are a scientist, you are an engineer, what are you doing here, and how does this relate back to your education and engineering? They said, oh, I don't write programs and I don't design circuits anymore, but my job is all about problem solving. I do a lot of number crunching to figure out what is the best way to make the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation more effective at improving healthcare in the United States. So it's all about the mindset. So here are 5 things I learned. The first thing is that it takes a planet. And we've always associated social impact with nonprofits and increasingly with social enterprises. But the reality is more complex. You need all kinds of organizations. You have nonprofits that deliver healthcare to the remotest parts of the world. You have nonprofits that are empowering young women to be engineers and entrepreneurs. But at the same time, you have nonprofits that do more harm than good. You have food banks that perpetuate food insecurity. You have hundreds of nonprofits on the peripheries of urban slums in developing countries that perpetuate dependency. So you have great nonprofits and you have not so great nonprofits. And you have nonprofits that change the world for people who do not want their world to be changed and that compromise the self-determination of the people. You have large industry has gotten bad rap for some good reasons, but at the same time, they have the resources to move the needle. When you have Hershey importing all their cocoa from Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana and a few other countries in that belt, they are responsible. They have to make sure that the people that are happy, they are doing well because that is their source of coffee. Intel supports 100,000 livelihoods. It's one of the greenest companies in the world. They are investing tens of millions of dollars in bridging the digital divide between men and women, especially in the developing world. And they make chips that go into our computers, and I don't know how we can get stuff done without those computers. So you need those large corporations. They drive our economy. Governments, I'm not a big fan of government, but you need them, and you need to give credit for them when it's due. We can blame the Chinese government for a whole bunch of things, but at the same time, we have to give them credit for bringing 87 million people out of poverty between 2000 and 2010. Only a communist government could have done that, is my contention. So let's give them credit for it while challenging them on other things. Here at home, the NSF and NIH fuels the entire innovation ecosystem. Nonprofits are, so enterprises are the engine of an economy. Microfinance institutions, for example, have been extremely successful in South Asia and India and Bangladesh, but they have absolutely got no traction in Sierra Leone and Liberia. The Urban Eye Hospital in India is credited with bringing 4 million people, in preventing blindness for 4 million people in South India, but it took them 40 years to build that up, and we have yet to see similar successes in other parts of the world. So social enterprises are not a panacea to development either. We can blame UN agency, we can criticize them for all kinds of things, but the UN Refugee Agency is the only reason why millions of refugees are alive today. So the point is that does every single organization have a positive social impact? The answer is no. You have great governments and bad governments, good policies and bad policies, good nonprofits and bad nonprofits, good corporations and bad corporations. Every organization has its own effectiveness, has its own impact. We must not generalize, but look exactly, specifically at what the impacts of an organization are, and use that to decide what kind of organizations do we want to work for. It really takes a planet, and we need to prepare students to work for all these kinds of organizations because every single one of them needs problem solvers and innovators. So it becomes a lot easier to find what the right fit for you is if you start asking the right question. But we often ask the wrong question. The question we ask is, what organization do I want to work for? The 300 people I interviewed, they did not think about what organization they wanted to work for. They asked the question, what problems do I really want to solve? What problems keep me up at night? What problems tug at my heartstrings? What problems am I willing to make sacrifices for? Am I willing to give a lifetime to? What problems do I really want to solve? And what organization is going to provide me the best platform with the best resources, the best tools, the best networks to actually solve that problem? And that makes it a lot easier to find the right platform for you. Let me give you a quick example. I interviewed Shoumik Mehdiratta, who is the head of urban transportation at the World Bank. And he had the mayors of all he had the phone numbers of all the mayors in Latin America on his phone. He was working them on various urban transportation systems. But I think he was a little, I conjecture, he was a little tired of the bureaucracy. But he really wanted to influence urban transportation. Where does he work now? Where do you think he would want to work if he wants to have a quick impact with urban transportation in Latin America? Anybody? I've got a few copies of my book. You're welcome to have one if you answer this. Any answers? Exactly. Who said that? Thank you, Kurt. So he works for Uber because that's where he sees he can have a large impact. It's not about the kind of organization, it's about the kind of problems you want to solve. And that's the way I think we should be thinking. There are lots of different platforms. How do you decide what is the best platform for you? You need to test drive every single platform, and here are 3 sets of considerations to help winnow down the kind of platforms you should test drive. The first is, what is your preferred engagement approach? You can solve a problem, say climate change, through policy approaches, through a technology approach by designing better products, with a business approach, through advocacy, through activism. Every approach is just as valid, and you need all of them. But some align better with you than others. So I'm a hardcore technology person, but I'm much more of a business person. I like business approaches to addressing challenges. I am not a policy person, and so as much as I respect it, that's not my preferred approach. The question is, what is your preferred approach that aligns best with your worldviews? The second question is, do you like to work with systems or do you like to work with people? You can address a challenge like global health working at the United Nations with the national government, with a small nonprofit, or working one-on-one with people. At one end of the spectrum, you can have an enormous impact, but you might never see the human impact of your work. At the other end of the spectrum, working one-on-one with people can be very personally fulfilling, but that impact is constrained to a smaller population. So what is your preference? Are you a people person? Are you a systems person? And third, and most importantly, what is your preferred work culture? Do you want to be based in Washington, D.C., or Bombay, or Nairobi, or Lusaka? Do you want to have a 24/7 job, or do you want a 9-to-5 job? Do you want to be a part of a very specific hierarchy where you know exactly what you're supposed to do? Or do you prefer an open, flat hierarchy, a round table to work together? Are you willing to wear a suit and tie to work every day, or do you prefer to get around in your Nike Freeze and get stuff done? right? So what is your preferred work culture? So try answering these questions and find platforms that align best with your worldview. How do you get a foot in the door? It comes down to two things. It's all about the quality of your work, and it's about the strength of your relationships. The quality of your work, and what I see quite often is that people in this arena will put that work together in a portfolio. And this is something that we've been doing quite a bit at Penn State. We say, hey, you guys have been in this program for 2-3 years. What exactly have you accomplished? What is your bundle of sticks? Skill set, mindset, learning outcomes, that's all good. What's the net impact of your work? Tell me about your passion. Passion is important, it gets you started. But if you're really passionate about a cause, you should not just be sitting on it, waiting on it. You should be reading up on every single thing there is to know. But more importantly, you should be actively engaged in trying to change that reality. So show me the passion, give me the evidence that you're working towards it. Tell me about your experiences, but more importantly, tell me about your impacts. I don't want you to tell me that I went to Zambia, or I went to Louisiana, or I went wherever, and I taught people how to brush their teeth, and I gave them t-shirts, I painted a couple of walls, and I took pictures for selfies, and I came back. No, I want you to tell me I spent 3 years in Burkina Faso, and I set up a social enterprise that sells feminine hygiene products to young women, and we have 50 employees and 1.2 million customers, and we have measured our impact. 90% of the schoolgirls are now in class, and that number has gone up from 50, that was 50% earlier. That is impact, that is evidence, and that's what I want you to show me. The proof is in the pudding. So it's all about your portfolio. The competencies, I asked these 300 people, so what are the important competencies to be successful in making the world a better place? And they said it's about 1, empathy, communication skills, both written and oral, learning being able to speak multiple languages, your global quotient, your contextual understanding, your resilience and adaptability, your teamwork skills, developing an entrepreneurial mindset. So it's right there, we are on track here, but there's a lot more stuff that we need to do. Being able to make sound ethical decisions, and most importantly, work experience. Work experience that is diverse in terms of geographical areas of the world, and that shows growth over time. So it's all about your portfolio, and it's all about your network. Opportunities in this arena are not advertised on LinkedIn. You find them through your network. And so you need to start building up your network, making those connections every opportunity you get. And that's how you get your foot in the door and gradually get yourself in the arena as well. You'll get your foot in the door, you'll be part of an organization. Will you be happy? What do the salaries look like? So all the people I interviewed were very kind in sharing their salary information with me. And the traditional thinking is that if you're a loser, you work for a nonprofit. If nobody's going to hire you, you go work for a nonprofit. But that is not true. All the people I spoke to were brilliant. Most of them had graduate degrees from some of the best schools in the country. Their salaries range from $30,000 to over $300,000. The median number was $80,000, which is over the threshold of $75,000 at which people are happy, if you've seen that research. $80,000 is a compelling number. It says that you can improve the human condition and you don't have to keep thinking about money the whole time. You can drink good wine, you can have a good vacation as well. So this is a valid form of engagement and spending your life. The final point I'd like to make is that you're always, always, always in the real world. All the people I spoke to talked about assumptions they made about who they are, what they do, what they can do, what they cannot do, and those assumptions became their prisons. They talked about how they wish they had started earlier. And there are some who they knew what they wanted to do when they were 20, and there were some who said, at 45, I realized that my life was going nowhere, and I was making a lot of money. My family was all settled, but I wasn't happy. And so I started working for a different organization where I can see the impact of my work. So you've always been in the real world, you're always in the real world. So don't keep waiting on something. Just get going. Start getting stuff done. Everything that is not made by nature was made by somebody at some point in time. So don't be afraid to make stuff up and start making your own reality. So get stuff done is the mantra for my new job at Lehigh, where we are trying to build a space where we get students and faculty and staff and external partners and dolphins and whales, everybody together to take a deep dive into new problems, new themes, and create value. What does that value look like? I don't know that. It could be any kind of value. It could be answering a question. It could be a new product, a new venture, a new play, a new poem. It could be anything at all that creates value in some tangible way. So it's been a phenomenal journey so far. That's what our space looks like, and I'm really excited to see how we can, build this up. And it's really not about the physical space. It's really about building that cultural space where you really have deep collaboration that results in tangible, measurable impact. So thank you. This is one of our ventures from last summer. That road from engagement to impact is long-winded, but I strongly believe that ultimately it should be about the impact and not about the experiences. And I hope that we can all work together to advance towards that impact. Thank you for having me here.